The protests had subsided. Streets that were filled to the brim with angry mobs mere weeks ago now stood strangely empty. Everyone just kind of went back to their lives and kept going on as normal. Now you might be tempted to think it was all over, that the blood had stopped running in the streets, that the brutal fighting that was the hallmark of the 2028 election was finally over. But this was just the calm before the storm. It was February of 2029, only a few months after one of the most violent US elections in all of history. Russia and Ukraine had already started beefing. The Ukrainians and Russians would both violate the peace deal multiple times by launching drone strikes in the other one's territory. But even more violence would come on the 23rd of February, when the Russians discovered that the Ukrainians were funding anti-Russian resistance movements all across Russian-occupied Ukraine. And this pissed Russia off. Russia got so mad about this, in fact, that they threw out the peace deal and invaded Ukraine again. Having learned from their mistakes in the previous war, Russia's military was larger and more modernized. This time, they took Kiev in just a couple of weeks. Since Belarus was basically already Russia's little bitch, Russia decided to finally annex them as well. The rest of the world looked on in horror. It appeared that the Russians had finally done it. Putin had reasserted Russian power on the world stage. But cracks in his empire were already beginning to show. Case in point, Iran. Iran had been a Russian ally for the longest time, so when Iran faced a democratic uprising in the southern part of the country, Russian troops stormed in to put down the rebellion. Unfortunately, the Russians put down the rebellion in such a brutal fashion that the Iranian people became radicalized against the Russian occupation. Eventually, with tons of support from the US, the EU, and Israel, Russian forces would be permanently driven out of Iran, and a new democratic constitution would be established. Putin was furious. He began to realize that neither he nor his empire was invincible. Russia's population was declining, Ukrainian resistance was wreaking havoc, and Putin himself was growing older and older. Movements for democracy grew stronger and stronger, and so did the Russian ultranationalists, who began to turn against Putin. In 2032, Putin would be shot by a Russian dissident. He didn't name a successor, and so Russia would soon collapse into civil war. Dmitry Medvedev kind of just took control of key areas around the Moscow area, and proclaimed himself leader of Russia, where he would rule unopposed for about a week. He attempted to purge all of his rivals, but Mikhail Mishustin, one of his rivals, would manage to escape to Siberia and proclaim his own rival government in the city of Vladivostok. Ukraine would use this crisis as an excuse to declare independence. From there, a couple of other groups, including Democrats, ultranationalists, and some other groups that I don't care enough about to mention, would also rebel against the central government. In a stunning reversal of fortunes, the Democratic faction would emerge victorious after the Civil War, but most of Russia's problems, such as its declining population and bad economy, would not be solved so easily. So yeah, that's the Russian Civil War. Bye. Get out of here, you losers, the video's over.